Stand with Ukraine. This word became a globally known expression. These words reflect a deep connection, true compassion, and real support provided in many ways. How can coaches and coaching communities support Ukraine and professional coaches in Ukraine? What kind of cooperation is possible to create between ICF Ukraine Charter Chapter and coaching communities in different countries? What are the challenges professional coaches are dealing with in this wartime? What is the future of coaching that professional coaches are seeing and creating together? This and many related questions are in our focus of our conversation today. This is the podcast Coaches Stand with Ukraine. Greetings to everybody who is listening to us now. I'm Larissa Homans, transformational story coach for leaders and change agents, past president of ICF Ukraine, co-leader of partnership initiatives, volunteer, and co-host of this podcast.
I'm Olga Vasilets, co-host of this podcast, ACC ICF Creative Resilience Coach for leaders in business and non-profit sectors, co-leader of partnership initiatives within ICF Ukraine chapter, volunteer. Thank you all our listeners. Your attention to our podcast is increasing with each new episode. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast, please do it now. Your support with likes, comments, questions, and shares with others is very important. You also can email to us directly. You can see our emails in the description to this episode.
We value your attention very much. When you like the topics we are touching, please invite your friends, colleagues, and partners to listen to. We are very glad to see that the podcast is getting more and more attention with every new episode. We have listeners from many different countries in Eastern and Central Europe, definitely in Ukraine, also in North and South America. So I hope we will like the conversation we prepared today for you. We invite you, our listeners, to contribute to the upcoming conversations too. Bring your questions, share topics you are caring about and interested to discuss. We created together not just this podcast, we create partnership together, and partnership matters. This is the 7th episode of the podcast. With every new conversation, the variety of topics are increasing, but at the same time, the energy we experience here while communicating remains the same. I know for sure, it's because the guests we invite are united by human compassion and professional values. Ola, I'm passing the microphone to you now.
Now I'm honored to greet here our colleague and guest, Julie Jones. Julie Jones, Executive Leadership Health Coach, member of ICF Metro DC Charter Chapter. Julie Jones is one of those curious and creative people who likes to work and move between multiple lines of business. She effectively translated her passion for health education, people development, and information technology into quite a multifaceted career. As a well-seasoned manager, Julie led employee and leadership development initiatives and large hardware software projects with multi-million-dollar budgets. She's been an International Coach Federation certified coach for nearly 15 years and provides both corporate, individual, and group coaching. Julie incorporates knowledge from her master's degree in health education and promotion and integrative nutrition cancer journey coaching certifications into her corporate and private coaching as requested. Julie is also an IT consultant and trained facilitator, though the bulk of her work is focused on coaching. Hello, Julie, and welcome to this podcast.
Hi, Olga. Thanks for inviting me.
Julie, we start every conversation with the same question, which is defining the common ground for what we do together. Coaches stand with Ukraine. What does it mean for you?
Well, what it means for me is I like to go back to when I first discovered the coaching profession. And what was amazing was that the community of being in a community of like-minded people who really just want to make the world a better place by helping people to be their best version of themselves. And that is an amazing ground on which to connect with others. So, what this means is that the coaching community in Ukraine is also a part of my community. The struggles that you're going through now, courageousness that's required. And I just think it's really important that the coaches of Ukraine, whether they're in Ukraine or elsewhere, that they know that they're seen, heard, and they're important. And they're worthy of the support of other coaches all around the world. So being able to standing with Ukrainian coaches means taking a stand against the Russian invasion of your country and your desire to live in a democratic way. So here I am as a coach supporting my sisters and brother coaches in Ukraine.
Thank you, Julie, for what you just said, especially when you mentioned that coaches in Ukraine is a part of your professional community. It's really touching because really we are belonging to the global professions, but what is happening in our country is deeply touching our soul and hearts. You are the one of the ICF Metro DC coaches who were engaged in the pro bono coaching support for small group ICF Ukraine coaches, and you are working with a translator. I know from other coaches that it's new experience. I'm curious, what prompted your decision to participate in this initiative?
As coaches, we often work with people who struggle with themselves and within themselves. And so they're constantly beating themselves up for past mistakes, making, not achieving their goals. And when I heard that Russia had started the war with Ukraine, I just couldn't imagine how difficult it must be to try and coach someone when you're surrounded by death and destruction. And I decided that if I were living in a war zone, that I'd want the support of a fellow coach. And I really wasn't sure what I could offer really to coaches who are living in such extreme conditions, or they're living elsewhere but they're really concerned about their families and their country. I decided that, well, I do have 15 years of coaching experience, and I have worked with people in trauma, survivors of trauma, though not as a coach. So I figured, well, maybe between all that experience, that maybe I can support the coaches in Ukraine. And so when the ICF Metro DC chapter asked for volunteers, I stepped up.
Thank you for this courage and professional responsibility.
I would like also to say that we appreciate a lot your support and thank you for this decision, Julie. My next question is how did this pro bono coaching experience influenced you? Did you have any challenging moments or what was supportive for you?
I was influenced by the commitment that Ukrainian coaches have to coaching, even in the face of danger. I mean, that's just amazing. And your desires to continue to grow the coaching profession within Ukraine while living in and working in a war zone. And I found myself asking, wow, would I do the same? If I were living in a war zone, would I be that committed to my coaching profession? So that really super impressed me. And my hat is off to all of you. It's huge. So that's what really impressed me about the coaches, and challenging myself, right? What would I do? And I found that in terms of struggles I had with it, there is the language and the cultural barriers. So even though we're like-minded and we really want to make the world a better place and help people be their authentic selves, it is still I was always worried about, am I communicating effectively? Am I meeting their needs? And so that was a learning edge for me. I finally had to just say, Julie, coaching is a process. I need to trust the process. And I think that's helped me as a coach.
It's interesting because what you just shared is also became very important discovery for professional coaches from ICF Metro DC chapter who were involved in this partnership, just to understand something about yourself and to face with the professional challenges which are making coaches even better coaches. It's interesting that you said about that too. Julie, let me invite you to look at the wider coaching landscape. You know that in Ukraine, coaching as a profession, as an industry, as a market is much younger than it is for the European countries, for Great Britain, for the United States. At the same time, coaching in Ukraine was growing faster for the recent 5-7 years, and it's growing even now. You were in close professional connections with the Ukrainian coaches for about 6 months. In your opinion, what Ukrainian coaches can bring to the global professional development? What would be a potential for mutually beneficial partnerships beyond the partnership projects we are related and we are the part of?
It's a really good question. And I want to look at this just from a little deeper level. And that's that when we're tested in life, the more challenging those tests, uh, and we have no choice but to live through them. And out of that, we as humans, we become wiser. We have a profound shift in understanding about ourselves, our world, and the people around us. And so I think that what the Ukrainian coaches will, bring to the rest of the world and to themselves is this deep wisdom that's being born in the fire of war that will inform their coaching and the collective consciousness of coaching that will take us all to a deeper level of engaging compassionately with humanity. And in terms of potential partnerships, I get excited when I think about this. But the answer is, for me, I don't know. But I do have a question, which is what wants to emerge from this? We answer that question, and then we can create partnerships. And so I have a challenge. I think we should start by gathering some Ukrainian coaches and coaches from the ICF Metro DC chapter or around the world, along with a really good, strong facilitator to see what we can co-create together. I'm one of those creative people, and I'm like, oh, what could we do with this? So I'm more about exploring at this point versus being able to identify something specific.
It's amazing. I believe that the partnership we are in now is the foundation for more different kinds of partnerships. I'm not talking only about the ICF Metro DC chapter. We are partnering with other chapters, and I believe that we'll partner with other coaching communities beyond ICF, professional organization we belong to. What you just said gave more confidence in what we believed before and in what we believe now. Coaching matters for us, and what we are doing matters for our country, for the professional global coaching community, and for other coaching communities. I hope this conversation, facilitated by the strong facilitator, can happen.
Julie, I'm so excited about this idea, and I really hope that we will have this conversation globally with coaches from different countries. And I believe it's going to be something extraordinary, but in meaning something beautiful, something amazing, and something very creative. My next question is also about coaching profession and specialization. Last week, I had a conversation with one of my good colleagues who is a psychotherapist. The discussion was held around differences between coaching and psychotherapy. And I got a question from him about fields or niches where coaching may be helpful. In Ukraine, we are still in our way of establishing coaching market, and the range of niches is still blurred. As I know, your specialization are executive and leadership coaching, integrative nutrition health coaching, and cancer journey coaching. What were the reasons for choosing these areas?
All right. Well, I fell into executive and leadership coaching because at the time of my training and certification, I was working in the corporate world. And I was really motivated because I'd seen and unfortunately worked with people with poor leadership skills. And so I had a passion for developing self aware, competent leaders. It was one of those, how can I help myself here? And I can help myself have a better work environment if I help leaders to create a better work environment. So, but that said, in terms of the health coaching, I've been interested in health and wellness since I was a teenager. So it goes back a really long time. And eventually I earned a master's degree. And at the time, I thought that I would jump off into public health. But what I discovered was that public health didn't pay quite as well as IT. And I was single. I had had to eat and pay for my mortgage and electricity and things like that. So I stayed within the corporate world, the IT world specifically, in order to make the ends meet. And what I did was I took all that knowledge and learning and coaching tools from the health education, from the health coaching training that I took, and I wove it into my coaching. In some cases, some of those tools that I learned, they work across the board, whether you're doing leadership coaching or if you're helping someone have a better quality of life. And in terms of the cancer coaching, I had some years ago developed a pretty serious autoimmune condition, which was life-threatening at the time. And I'm happy to say that I no longer have that condition. But what I really wanted to do was share with people from that perspective, coach people from that perspective. The biggest thing that I learned was that death isn't the worst thing that can happen to me. With that in mind, I had the freedom to really go deep within myself, to heal, to understand who I am, what my values really are, and how I wanted to be in the world. So I decided to help those with cancer or any serious disease, chronic disease, to leverage that interest in helping people to stand more in their own personal power so that they can make decisions about treatments or what they do after they're in remission or how to move through their life with more dignity. I think we do that when we stand more in our own power. That's what I love to help people do, whether it's cancer coaching, health coaching, or the leadership and executive coaching, getting people to a place where they're more comfortable with themselves. And that leads to having the courage to do what the right things are with their own unique flair.
Julie, it's very difficult for me to not ask more deep questions, especially how do you navigate your coaching engagements between these three areas, executive leadership coaching and cancer journey coaching. Based on my personal experience, cancer became a very strong driver to take very challenging choices in life. In coaching profession, in leadership and volunteering, you mentioned that what my values are really. You know about our values, but when you are facing cancer, for example, this is a question: who am I and what are my values really? What I'm going to do, why I'm here. But I hope probably it would be better to have another conversation to learn more from your experience, especially how to work with leaders with life-threatening challenges. But my question now is about leadership, coaching, and courage. Do these things are connected for you? And if so, then how?
Oh, yes, they're absolutely connected. So I'd like to share a quote with you that I came across many years ago, long before I became a coach. And it's from Helen Keller. So Helen Keller is a woman who lost both sight and hearing when she was an infant due to measles. So in her very early years, she essentially had no language and only had that world of an infant and sensations until the age of 6, when she found a teacher, or a teacher was acquired, and her name was Anne Sullivan. Even though she was deaf and blind, Helen Keller led a really courageous life, and she became a public speaker, and she wrote a book, and she helped to change the world's perceptions about disabilities. So this is the quote: "Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. To keep our faces toward change and behave like free spirits in the presence of fate is strength undefeatable." So this quote really spoke to me. To be able to remain our authentic selves in the presence of whatever life offers us, and to flow through life's circumstances while resisting the urge to remain the same. That is what makes us stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. And it's my personal goal to live more authentically into my life and to help others do the same. This requires vulnerability. The willingness to be vulnerable requires tremendous courage. So, how much more can we offer the world as leaders, as coaches, and community members if we're not loaded down with others or society's expectations of us, and we trust our authentic in ourselves, our free spirits, our higher self? If we're not loaded down, what kind of amazing leaders could we be? And that authenticity combined with compassion and caring is what this world really desperately needs. So we can't really not speak to courage when we're coaching, because it's all about vulnerability and the willingness to be vulnerable. And of course, as coaches, we have to meet our clients wherever they're at. And sometimes they're not willing to be very vulnerable, but we chip away so that they can be free to be the leaders that we need. And I'd like to just add something from David White about this. He talks about courage. So David White is a well-known poet and author, and who does a lot of deep thinking. And he says this about courage. I'm going to read it to you. "Courage is the measure of our heartfelt participation with life, with another, with a community, a work, a future. To be courageous is not necessarily to go anywhere or do anything, except to make conscious those things we already feel deeply, and then to live through the unending vulnerabilities of those consequences. To be courageous is to see our feelings deeply in the body and in the world, to live up to and into the necessities of relationships that often already exist with things we find we already care deeply about, with a person, a future, a possibility in society, or with an unknown that begs us on and has always begged us on. So, how can leadership coaching not be about courage?
As to me, it's a rhetorical question. It is
Mm.
connected. Thank you. And I will ask you to share the quotes you just used and the previous one so we can add to the podcast when we are
Sure.
providing the explanation.
Julie, I have another question for you, and I feel like it is also connected in some way with courage, authenticity, and vulnerability. In one of our previous conversations, you mentioned about one book, the book about women and war. And you told me that the plot of this book draws a comparison of the war in Ukraine. These times are difficult for everyone in Ukraine. What would you like to say or wish the Ukrainian women who were affected by war, both in Ukraine and abroad?
Yes, so that particular book is called Churchill's Secret Agent. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name now. But it was a story about a young woman who found herself being recruited to be a part of the French resistance. So she's British, but she spoke French fluently. And so she signed up to do this because during that period of time in the war, London was being bombed. She'd lost her parents, she'd lost her brother, who was a pilot. And of course, this is fiction. But the wonderful thing about this story is the author based it on true accounts of women who supported in real and meaningful ways during wartime. I think women particularly hold the world in a way that it's about community. It's about preserving our humanity. Not that men don't, but women have a different approach. And taking that energy of deep commitment to our values, our way of life, and commitment to survival of all that represents is something each woman in Ukraine can hold deep in their heart and use that energy to defeat the enemy, to defeat Russia in their own small way. It might not be, a big being a spy or something like that. I mean, that's quite a stretch for, I think most people. But to use that energy to maintain hope, to stand in your own authenticity, to be in that place of courage. Yeah. That's the correlation I gathered between what Ukrainian women are going through and this book.
When you're sharing, I just recalled what my mom liked to repeat quite often, that the woman in the Ukrainian family is holding three corners of the ceiling or of the roof of the house. From my experience and from what I'm observing, and I think that many women in Ukraine can tell you the same. So the feminine energy is extremely strong. And also this is the source of vitality for all of us.
Yes. And I'm deeply honored to experience that, from a distance. It's so hard to articulate. When women in Ukraine stand in their strength as women, in that feminine energy, it does something for me as well. So know that, Ukrainian women, that you're building strength for women all around the world.
And I feel this is a moment to say that Ukrainian women and children and all people are protected now at this moment when we are talking by the brave men and also the brave women who are on the front line and who are protecting Ukraine in different ways, especially now when these massive rock attacks are happening. Men and women who are working on the energy field, who are providing medical support, who are doing amazing things because they are standing for Ukraine, they are protecting Ukraine.
Indeed.
I want to extend Ola's questions and ask you, Julie, what is your key message to everybody who will listen to this conversation? What is your key message that matters today for you and will matter for them and will matter tomorrow and after tomorrow?
Well, I think it goes back to that community. We really can't do anything without community. And I think the power of the community of all of us with our goal on making the world a better place, helping others, besides helping ourselves through the coaching that we receive from other coaches, that it's a shared experience. We can be stronger together because of that. Community is important.
As
The
usual,
coaching community is important. Sorry. The coaching community, the global community that the International Coach Federation has developed, supported, nurtured, is critically important to the whole world.
as usual, time is flying fast, and we are coming to the end of our conversation. Julie, thank you very much for being with us today, talking about your experience, sharing your thoughts, and contributing new topics for further exploration. Let me express deep gratitude to you and all coaching colleagues for professional support, deep compassion, and proactive actions we make together. And I'm also looking forward to our next interesting, deep, and I believe fruitful conversations in the following cooperation.
Yeah,
Thank
I just
you.
want to say thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Julie, from the bottom of my heart. I really look forward to have another conversation with you soon. Let's see when it will be possible to have that conversation, to plan it.
Sure.
For everybody who is listening to this podcast, I'd like to remind, please subscribe to get notification when new episodes will be released. You know, your likes and comments will help us to bring this podcast up in social media. We are interested to bring as much attention as possible to this conversation. We invite you to contact Ola and me directly if you have questions or suggestions. You can see Ola's and my contacts in the description for this podcast, and also I'm asking Julie's permission to add her contact so the people can reach you directly, Julie.
Yes, that's fine.
And once again, it was our privilege to have this conversation with Julie Jones, Executive Leadership Health Coach, member of ICF Metro DC Charter Chapter. Julie is from the cohort of the ICF Metro DC Chapter coaches who provide pro bono support for ICF Ukraine coaches. Thank you, Julie, and thank you to all your colleagues. As always, I'm very happy to say thank you, my dear friend and partner, Ola Vasilets, for co-hosting and co-creating this podcast. And using this time and one more opportunity, we say many thanks to all coaching colleagues who stand with Ukraine. So I can stop conversation, or Julie, you would like to say something before?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I hope I made sense. My heart goes out to you guys.
This is the podcast Coaches Stand with Ukraine. More talks are coming. Stay tuned, stay connected, stay with Ukraine.